The New World Screwworm invasion of North America is serious, but not yet panic-worthy. Once common through North and Central America, it was eradicated through decades of sterile insect releases. The screwworm majorly breached the South American quarantine in 2021, moving across Panama's Darien Gap and rapidly arriving at the US-Mexico border. But this isn't the first time the fly pushed on US borders. In 2016 and 2017, there was an outbreak of screwworm infestations in the Florida Keys, resulting in 145 known cases. The cause of the fly infestation was never determined, but was likely spread from neighboring infested Caribbean islands. But the outbreak did not expand beyond the Keys themselves, and the single mainland case did not establish a breeding population. In the Florida case, some 150 million sterile flies were released in the Keys, and by April 2017, just 6 months after the infestation was discovered, the screwworm had been successfully eradicated. The current outbreak won't be so easy to control. First, let me explain how the New World Screwworm lives. Female New World Screwworms mate only once during their lifetime, after which they search for hosts bearing fresh wounds or unprotected body orifices. The female deposits several hundred eggs in a batch. The eggs hatch within 24 hours, and the larvae immediately begin feeding on the living tissue. The larvae actively cut into living flesh with their sharp mouthhooks, burrowing deeper into the wound as they feed, creating spiral excavations, which is where the common name screwworm comes from. Full larval development only takes about a week. Mature larvae drop from the host and pupate over about 7 to 10 days. The relatively short adult lifespan combined with the rapid larval development means that in warm conditions, multiple generations occur within a single season, allowing populations to expand rapidly once established. Screwworms used to be found in the US, but were eradicated through a continuous release of sterile male flies. Since female flies only mate once in their lives, if they mate with a sterile male, the females will never lay viable eggs. This caused the local US population to go extinct. This process was then used to push the fly out of Central America as well. For 2 decades, a permanent biological barrier maintained along the Panama-Colombia border successfully prevented northward range expansion of screwworm. More than 100 million sterilized male flies are released each week along the Panama-Colombia border, theoretically ensuring that the emerging females lay infertile eggs and preventing screwworm populations from spreading. However, beginning in June 2021, this containment failed. The Darien Gap, a difficult-to-traverse landscape of rainforests and swamps along the Colombia-Panama border, had previously been the focal point of the barrier. The screwworm reemergence in this region suggests that the maintenance of sterile fly release may have been compromised, or that wild fly populations somehow overcame the barrier through mating behavioral shifts. The initial reappearance of the screwworm in Panama in 2021 went relatively unnoted in international news. However, within 2 years, the situation escalated dramatically. In 2023, screwworm detection in Panama rose from 25 cases per year to more than 6,500 cases. Several factors caused the loss of containment. Between 2021 and 2024, more than 1.2 million migrants crossed the Darien Gap. The crossing peaked at 500,000 people and any of their associated animals crossing in 2023. US officials believe that the mass movement of these people contributed to the operational breakdowns in the region's screwworm control infrastructure and surveillance. Additionally, there have been recent expansions of screwworms from Colombia across the permanent quarantine barrier into Panama, suggesting that the release of sterile males may be losing effectiveness due to reduced competitiveness with wild flies. This phenomenon represents a biological limitation of the sterile insect technique that has not previously been a significant constraint. Once the Panama quarantine barrier failed, Screwworms spread northward extremely fast. Within months of the 2023 explosion of cases in Panama, detections were reported in every Central American country. By late 2024, screwworm had been documented in Mexico, with northward progression into regions on the US border. The ability of screwworm to establish and spread reflects its flexibility in host use. Unlike many parasites that have evolved narrow host preferences, the New World Screwworm is an opportunistic parasite, capable of infesting a broad spectrum of warm-blooded animals. The primary economic concern of these flies is centered on livestock. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and horses are all susceptible to infestation. However, screwworm is not restricted to livestock. The Florida Keys outbreak illustrated this. The majority of the cases were in endangered key deer, as well as several household pets and raccoons. Being able to use wild animals as hosts has a profound implication for control efforts. Once established in a region with sufficient wildlife populations, screwworm can persist even in the absence of livestock, making eradication dependent on suppression across the entire landscape rather than merely a livestock management issue. Sterile male releases will likely be ramped up in the US and Mexico to control the spread of the fly, as well as severe limitations on the movement of livestock and the expanded use of pesticides and anti-parasite medications. However, if the cause of this outbreak is from some unrecognized failure in the sterile insect technique, we could have bigger issues. This technique is used for the control of multiple extremely destructive agricultural pests and has been successfully used since the 1950s, and its sudden failure would be catastrophic. Potential failure of the sterile insect technique falls into three kind of obvious categories. Either there has been a human failure, which seems unlikely as it should have been easily fixed by now, or an evolutionary shift in either wild males or wild females. It's possible that wild males may have evolved some behavioral trait which makes them easily outcompete sterile lab males, like being overall faster to find mates. It could also be that wild female flies have evolved either a preference for wild males, or even more disastrously, the ability to mate multiple times in their life. Any of these evolutionary shifts would be disastrous for sterile technique control, potentially making it impossible. Some attention has already been paid to the issues of smuggling livestock from Central America into the US, which is a huge problem for more reasons than mere screwworm. But if screwworm becomes a more permanent feature in the US again, other issues will have to be dealt with. Backyard animal breeders will be the most obvious issue. Regular people who keep and breed agricultural animals have been a continuous issue for the control of animal disease. We saw this with the last outbreak of bird flu and people keeping chickens, or African swine fever and people with pet pigs. Frequently, these people will refuse to comply with any restrictions. A less talked about issue will be street dogs, cats, and homeless people. All three will become serious background hosts for screwworm, and will be almost impossible to deal with. Most people will object to the outright killing of stray dogs and cats at a large scale, and there will be very limited ways to force homeless people to get medical attention for myiasis. It is very likely that this new screwworm infestation will be a long-term background issue for North America for the foreseeable future.